guys, it's Caleb back again with more bad fanfiction theater, and I'm alone this time because both Hawkeye and Hushcho refused to read this and the subsequent story with me. Some of you may remember how bad Star Turds was. Some of you may have also listened to the more recent Pokemon story and how bad that was. So, apparently somebody wasn't satisfied that we had read the worst of the worst thus far, especially in considering the Pokemon story, and decided to issue a little challenge, which I feel I should take up and at least try to get through this, because if Hawkeye won't help me and Hushcho definitely won't help me, I think I'm in for a really hellish ride. I am reading Sweet Apple Massacre, a My Little Pony fanfiction. You can find it apparently saved on Google Docs and Pastebin. I'll be reading the Google Docs version because apparently the Pastebin version isn't as readable or something like that. If you want to follow along, the link will be in the description down below. Let's get started. Big Macintosh surveyed the many apple trees that made up Sweet Apple Acres. It was nearly Applebuck season once again. I don't know what Applebuck is. Whatever. And it looked as though they would be having a bumper harvest. Bumper? This year. He nodded satisfied. To himself, the trees, what? His sister Applejack walked up beside him. Hoo boy howdy, I sure am glad you ain't injured this time, Big Macintosh, she said. Why, there's even more apples on them trees than last year. Yep, Big Macintosh replied in his characteristic manner. Them's a lot of apples. Applejack was silent for a moment, enjoying the feel of the slight breeze against her blonde mane. Say, I don't suppose you've seen Apple Bloom anywhere, have ya? I've been looking for her all day, and she ain't nowhere to be found. Big Macintosh shook his head. Sorry, sis, can't say I have. Well, I kind of have a feeling where this is going. Darn, that silly filly's probably gone off somewhere with her friends. I just hope she ain't getting herself into any mischief. Or else there'll be hay to pay. Yeah, I'm sure there will be some hay to pay. Yes. Don't you go worrying yourself, Applejack, he replied. I'm sure she's perfectly fine. But anyway, I need to go back to the barn. I gotta go and press some apples for my home-brewed apple cider. You hoofed. Yeah, okay, I get it, they're horses. I get it. I hoof-picked a few apples earlier, especially all nice and plump and ripe, and they ain't gonna press themselves. I'm sure you are. Applejack laughed. You sure do love your cider, don't ya? Just make sure Apple Bloom don't get her hooves on it again. We all know what happened last time. Big Macintosh chuckled along with his sister. Yep. The large red pony trotted back to the barn and gently closed the door. I got a feeling where this is going. He opened the trap door with his mouth and went down the steps into an old disused apple cellar. Usually it was just filled with junk, scrap metal, old worn out plows, old rope, and various other bits and bobs that had outlived their usefulness. I'm sure they have. Big Macintosh often came down here when he wanted to get away from the world, to withdraw for a little while for some peace and quiet. Today was different, however. The old rope, at least, had found a new use because in cellar space, not in the cellar space, but just in cellar space, were Apple Bloom and her fellow cutie mark crusaders, Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo. Scootaloo? I haven't watched My Little Pony, so some of these names are just like, what? Bound and gagged, propped up against the wall, 3 pairs of scared round eyes looked looked up at Big Macintosh as he approached. "Now then, ya three fillies," he said, as placid as ever, "y'all need to learn a lesson. You need to learn not to mess around with Big Macintosh. All I want is some peace and quiet," he said, looking directly at Apple Bloom. The three red-haired filly, the little red-haired filly cowered under his gaze. "All I want is a quiet life, with all you cutie mark crusaders running around the place, making with the noise. When I'm finished with y'all, there gonna be no noise from you ever again." Well, this is a charming fellow. As Big Macintosh approached, Scootaloo flapped her wings, struggling to get off the ground. Big Macintosh laughed and grabbed one of her wings. "How? He has no hands!" He twisted, at first slow, watching the pain visibly grow in her eyes, but then tore hard. Tore hard? How do you tore something hard? You can tear it. You can twist it, twist hard, turn, whatever. Smiling slightly when he heard the snap and the muffled whimper that came from Scootaloo. The muffled whimper. I don't think if my wing was just, the bone was just snapped, I don't think I'd, whimper. I think even if I was bound and gagged, I'd be screaming. It might not be actually very loud, but I would be screaming. There'd be no question about it. He then threw her to the ground. "Your wings are useless, you silly filly," he said pleasantly. He then went to a toolbox and took out a rusty knife with a jagged blade and dropped it in front of the three fillies. I'm gonna take off those gags now," he said. "The first one of you to scream gets their tongues cut out." Yeah, I'm not, stupid. I know that My Little Pony is like a cute little kid show, even the new one. So for somebody who really likes the show and the characters, this is probably heavily disturbing for you that this would suddenly happen. But I have no attachment to the show. So he took off Sweetie Belle's gag first. She looked up at him with terror, but managed to stay quiet. Next was Scootaloo. She let out a strangled whine and was breathing heavily. Well, I would think so, considering her wing was broken. Still in horrendous pain from her broken wing, but managed to resist the temptation. Finally, he removed the gag from his sister Apple Bloom. Yes, because we were gonna threaten to kill her sister, and probably actually kill her sister, but whatever. She stared at him with her large round eyes filled with fear and incomprehension. This was Big Macintosh, after all, her big brother, and the gentlest of souls, wasn't he? Surely this was just a horrible joke, but she had seen what he had done to Scootaloo's wing, and it was definitely no joke. She took a deep breath. Didn't he tell you not to say anything? I would try to run away instead of say anything. "Applejack!" Big Macintosh shoved his hoof in Apple Bloom's mouth, silencing her scream. He sighed and shook his head. "I told you not to scream, Apple Bloom. You should listen to your big brother." I'll scream and scream again, and Applejack will hear, and Apple Bloom said flagrantly. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I kinda hope you do. After all, I still ain't forgiven Applejack for that injury she gave me last apple buck season. If you want Applejack to join y'all down here, scream away. I, for one, would welcome her company. But now, to business. Big Macintosh picked up a knife. "How? He's a horse!" and loomed over the cowering Apple Bell. He pinned her down with a powerful hoof and stuck the knife into Apple Bloom's mouth. Sweetie Belle vomited at the sight. The thick yellow and acid-smelling liquid spattering heavily on the floor. Scootaloo managed not to be sick, but rather gasped and sobbed and choked with panic. Big Macintosh forced open Apple Bloom's mouth and with some effort cut out her tongue. Apple Bloom tried to scream, but her mouth was too full of blood, so it was more of a muted gurgle. After a short while, she collapsed, tears streaming from her eyes, falling unconscious from the shock and the pain. Technically, granted, I'm not 100% sure, but can't you, bleed to death if somebody cuts out your tongue? After a short while, she collapsed, tears streaming from her eyes, falling unconscious from the shock and pain. Okay, I got that. Big Macintosh then took the tongue and rolled it in the puddle of putrid vomit on the floor. Ew. Yeah, this is the kind of thing I don't like when it comes to stories like this. The torture, there's a big disconnect there that I'm just like, This, what's about to happen, I'm just like, no, ew. Big Macintosh then took the tongue and rolled it in the puddle of putrid vomit on the floor. He smiled at Scootaloo. You hungry? Scootaloo shook her head vigorously and cast him a defiant glare. If Rainbow Dash was here, she would kick the crap out of you, you maniac. I don't know about that. Big Macintosh shrugged. Well, she ain't. And anyway, I wouldn't be so sure about that. Rainbow Dash ain't as tough as she likes to make out. He shoved the vomit-covered tongue in Scootaloo's mouth and used his hoof to clamp her mouth shut. Don't you go trying to spit it out now, he said calmly with a little laugh, and the filly struggled and squirmed. Didn't your mother ever tell you how important it is to chew your food? Your horses, you don't eat meat, let alone tongues covered in vomit. Scootaloo closed her eyes and flapped her one good wing desperately, eventually swallowing Apple Blossom's tongue. Big Macintosh, still holding the writhing Scootaloo down with his strong hooves, then mounted the orange filly and slid his penis into her tight virgin pussy, raping her for several minutes, while Sweetie Belle watched, trembling with revulsion. Apple Bloom was still out cold, blood pouring from her torn-up mouth. Cutie Mark Crusaders rape victims, Big Macintosh said with tender mockery as he fucked Scootaloo, followed by a gentle chuckle. Guess y'all found your purpose in life now. Your special talent is getting raped. Yep. That is a giant douche hole. Giant douche hole. Good going, douche. Your dreams have come true. Eventually, he withdrew from Scootaloo and gripped her head tight and repeatedly punched her hard with a hoof in the face, causing her nose to shatter and spurt with blood. He scooped up some of the blood and some of Sweetie Belle's vomit with his tongue. Ew. And held it in his mouth so that it mixed with his saliva, and then brought his mouth close to Scootaloo's and spat the rank mixture into her mouth. He clamped his hoof over her mouth and held her nose until she gagged and eventually had no choice but to swallow. As Scootaloo retched and spat and cried, he turned to Sweetie Belle. He grabbed her easily as she was too shocked and traumatized to respond, and with apparent amusement he rammed her horn up Scootaloo's ass. Okay. The horn was too big and hard, so the skin around Scootaloo's ass ripped and blood and fecal matter Matter first trickled and then poured profusely down onto Sweetie Belle's face, as well as urine as Scootaloo pissed herself. "You keep doing that, Sweetie Belle," he said. The unicorn carried on, pushing her horn up Scootaloo's anus, slowly but surely. Her normally well-groomed pink and purple mane was now stained a reddish-brown, glistening with the wetness of the piss and blood. "If you stop, I'll come over there and, get creative. I may seem a bit dense, but I'm actually quite a creative stallion, you know," Big Macintosh said with a wink. "Yep." He went to Apple Bloom and pretended his little sister's unconscious body... He went to Apple Bloom and penetrated, his little sister's unconscious body. So now we're engaging in incest. Yay! With his hard cock, while he violated her and another knife. Shouldn't there be a with another knife that he somehow acquired that we didn't bother to mention until now? Or is this the same knife? And again, how does he have a knife? He has hooves, and you've never said anything about him carrying this around in his mouth. While he violated her and another knife, this one sharp and shiny, and sliced open her flank, causing her glistening intestines to flop out wetly onto the floor. He glanced over and was pleased to see that Sweetie Belle was still using her horn to anally penetrate Scootaloo, and her face was now completely covered in blood and feces and urine. He turned his attention back to Apple Bloom and scooped up her crimson entrails and wrapped them around her neck. You know, technically, she should be dead now. Still fucking the filly, and with his front hooves he pulled and pulled until it was wrapped so tightly around Apple Bloom's neck that it broke her windpipe. She was now surely dead, but Macintosh continued fucking her. Okay, so now we have necrophilia. Continued fucking her furiously until her body began to lose form and collapse into a quivering, amorphous mass of fur, and blood and flesh. The perineum had fallen away, leaving a single red and raw gaping void. He carried on until he was fucking nothing but a single swollen and bloody orifice, and then discarded his baby sister's carcass as though she were nothing more than a rotten apple core. Because in this fic, this character's a douchebag! And several other things worse than a douchebag. He then took the knife and grabbed Sweetie Belle and tossed her aside. He forced himself onto Scootaloo's ruined anus, and then took the knife and cut from her ass in a sweeping motion up her belly, and all her innards fell out. He then grabbed her head, twisted and tore it clean off. I don't think he's strong enough to do that. Using his immense strength, and fucked it in the mouth, and then tossed it aside. He then had sex with her headless body. Why? Both in the vagina and the ass until he got bored. Why? Like, seriously, why? I don't understand. Okay. What gets me here is that this is obviously, meant to be a character death fic. And I don't like character death fics, but I don't know these characters, so I really don't care. But what I don't understand is why rape has to be involved in it. He's going to kill them, and unless somewhere it's stated he's a necrophiliac, or turned on by pain, I don't really see why he has to have sex with them. Especially when they're dead. It kind of loses the point of a punishment, so to speak, if they're dead. We haven't established that he's a necrophiliac. We really haven't established anything. I guess the idea is that he's a fucked up character, but there's no weight to the story. There's no... Maybe it's something I'm missing because I have not watched the show and I don't know the characters. Perhaps. Sweetie Belle was the last remaining cutie mark crusader. She was herself barely conscious, overcome with the nauseating stench of blood, shit, and piss that covered her horn and her face. Big Macintosh pinned Sweetie Belle down with his hoof and plunged the knife into her green eye and twisted, causing vitreous fluid to dribble out onto the handle. At that, Sweetie Belle let out a throaty whine and involuntarily emptied her bowels, and the aroma of fresh urine and feces filled the apple cellar once again. He withdrew the knife and did the same to the other eye, each time holding her tight. She has more than 2 eyes. How? How does she have more than 2 eyes? Each time holding her tight and sticking his hoof into her mouth to silence her agonized screams. He licked the vitreous fluid that had leaked onto the knife, and then methodically began cutting and hacking at her front left hoof using the rusty knife. You just said it was, shiny and clean and now how it doesn't get rusty that fast. The knife was quite blunt, so it took a Herculean effort to get through the skin, bone, and cartilage, but eventually the bone splintered and the leg came off. He did the same to her other legs until all 4 were amputated, and nothing remained but bloody stumps, with slimy white ligament and broken bone shards hanging out. At some point, Sweetie Belle had passed out. She probably should be dead by now. The overwhelming pain too much for her to bear. She probably bled to death. He then used the knife to gorge out her left eye. You said he already did all this, and jammed his penis into her eye socket, penetrating repeatedly deep into her brain, enjoying how tight her skull felt around his hard shaft. Okay, I want to say something that might creep some people out. Does this person not know anything about the size of a horse penis? Because there is no way you could cram that into an eye socket and into somebody's brain. I'm sorry, you would fracture the entire skull. Let's see. Penetrating repeatedly deep into her brain, enjoying how tight her skull felt around his hard shaft, and how warm and squishy the brain matter felt against the tip of his throbbing penis. As he did, he twisted Sweetie Belle's neck. After he had finished skull-fucking her, he cracked open her skull, and with a swift stamp of his hoof, and bent down and ate some of the exposed brain, taking care to spit out a few fragments of skull bone that had got mixed in as he chewed. Why would he do that? Horses are not cannibalistic. It was warm and slimy, though, and stuck to the back of his throat. He swallowed and then raped Sweetie Belle in the ass until it tore open, and his... can you really call it rape if the person is dead? I don't think so. I think that's probably more along the lines of disrespecting the remains. Desecrating. There we go. I finally came up with the word desecrating the remains. He swallowed and then raped Sweetie Belle in the ass until it tore open, and his engorged penis was smeared with what little fecal matter remained in her rectum. He took one of Sweetie Belle's detached wings and shoved it inside her ass, and then fucked Apple Bloom and Scootaloo's bodies the same way, forcing the amputated limb in, hoof first, as far as it could go. He said he took her wing, right? Oh no, detached legs. I think I read that as wings. He took her detached leg and shoved it inside her ass, and then fucked Apple Bloom and Scootaloo's bodies the same way, forcing the amputated limb in, hoof first, as far as it could go. Again, they're all dead, so what point would there be to doing this? They're already dead. His point's made. He thought how strange it was that the still lumps of torn flesh that he was fucking with Sweetie Belle's legs had been so vibrant and alive such a short time ago. But now all three were dead, and he finished by spurting his voluminous load into Apple Bloom's destroyed backside. He watched with satisfaction as the semen and blood and shit mixed together, forming a foamy maroon pool. He bent down and greedily lapped up some of it with his tongue, pressing his tongue deep into her anal cavity, so as not to miss any, letting some dribbling down his chin. It tasted foul, of course, a rancid, tangy slime that burned his throat, but it felt so satisfying. He swallowed the filthy goo and wiped his mouth with a hoof. It was done. Big Macintosh would finally get his peace and quiet. Big Macintosh, you down there? It was Applejack. He looked at the disfigured corpses of the three fillies, all now barely recognizable as the oh-so-sweet Cutie Mark Crusaders, and realized he felt strangely unsatisfied. So you felt satisfied by, and now you suddenly don't. Okay, whatever. It had been a bit too quick and easy. Now Applejack, that would be a challenge. She was Ponyville's best athlete, after all. She even had the prize pony Ponyville trophy to prove it. And, of course, he still hadn't forgiven her for that injury. He felt his penis stiffen once again in anticipation. "Hey, Big Mac," I said, "are you down there?" came Applejack's lilting voice again, this time more insistent. Big Macintosh replied serenely, "I sure am, sis. Hey, come down here a minute. I've got something to show you." "Sure thing. What is it?" "It's a surprise." "Oh boy, I sure do love surprises. Something real nice, I bet." "Something real nice?" Big Macintosh looked at the mangled, mutilated remains of the Cutie Mark Crusaders, and his lips curled into a thin smile. "Yep." So, how was that story? I didn't really care about it. If this was meant to offend me somehow, it failed, because I think mostly this troll fanfiction author was meaning to try and disturb My Little Pony fans. But as someone who never watched the show, this doesn't bother me. It's nothing I haven't read in a story before. Again, probably my mileage varies. I read Star Turds. I read the Pokemon fic. I've read this. I'm mostly just like, yeah, been there, seen that, asshole, come on, let's go. And that's really the gist of it. I think I've pretty much said already everything that I could say again now that I'm done with the story. Basically, there's no real. It has the same trap. This was obviously intended as a trap fic, a trap troll fic, where we were literally intending for unsuspecting My Little Pony fans to find this story and get suckered into reading it. And then suddenly there's pony bondage, and then suddenly there's pony rape and death, and mutilation and gross shit and stuff going on. This had pretty much the same intention, I think, as the Turds story, where the author obviously hated the fandom and wanted everybody to suffer. But this doesn't faze me, and I could not recommend it to anybody unless they wanted to do it on their own fanfiction reading show. I've never seen My Little Pony, so I can't have any attachment to the characters or even know who they are or what they look like or what they would and wouldn't do. I will say, if you're trying to write something scary, you need a little more build up, other than, like, I can easily guess where this fic was going to go once we got towards the end of the first half of this story, and I'm like, oh, well, okay, I know how this is going to end up going. But basically that was just a trap to get you to think that this was just your, cutesy, everyday My Little Pony fanfiction. But if you want to write something kind of scary and serious, you have to have build up to it. It's something called suspense. That's what makes non-con stories work. It's what makes murder mysteries work. Any kind of dramatic drama show, you like CSI, Medium, the various Sherlock TV shows and movies, anything that involves a mystery or an element of you're not sure of, the viewer or reader isn't sure of what's happening. Anytime you have something with mystery, you have to build suspense. The reader has to have that build up. Pardon any pun you could get out of that. And the story really fails on that. Coming into this, I already know it's a bad fanfiction. I already know it's, from the start of it, that it's more like Turds. It's meant to be a trap and to really hate on anybody who likes My Little Pony and probably would want a really nice, sweet story. Another thing was, there was no, once you actually got into the violence, the stuff going on, better stories, and I mean like legitimate, really good fan fiction, like love letters, BBC Sherlock love letters, can do it better. Can take these same elements, talk about these same elements, and be really fucking creepy and disturbing, and I like that kind of thing. If you can make it really fucking creepy, but keep my interest, you've done a good job. You've done a good job. Love Letters is a shining example of that. I would say maybe to a sort of same extent with Death Note, Bodies in Beds, which is not necessarily necrophilia, but it implies necrophilia. That's also a really good story. That somewhat disturbing content, but done very well. And my cat is after my attention. Hi, Eddie. I don't think you want to guest star in this story. If you give me a minute to finish up, I will get you some food. Let's see. This is gonna sound, and you're gonna be like, no, don't say this, Caleb, don't say this. It's really too short and not detailed enough. But, since this is basically a hate fic onto the fandom, and to the people of the fandom, it's really good that it's, short, sweet, sour, sweet, and to the point. Because otherwise, I think this would be a very, very rage-inducing story. If you're someone like me who hasn't seen the show, don't read this. Maybe even if you do your own fanfiction show, I mean, just make sure you have the warnings and you are very much aware of what you're probably going to get into, like I was, because I'm like, yeah, I pretty much think I know where this story is going to get to. I could see why Hawk doesn't want to read this. I could probably even mostly understand why Husho doesn't want to read this, them having watched the show and have an attachment to some of these characters. I think I would have been able to more react had I seen the show, but I haven't, and I don't plan on watching the show. I'm just not interested in doing so. But these are all elements I've read and seen before, most in better fanfics, but pretty much it follows the same format of Star Turds, and now that I've read Star Turds, I'm not fazed by this in the slightest. I cannot give this a recommendation. I would recommend you avoid it like the plague. That's probably all I really have to say to it. I'm sorry if I'm not very coherent. Sometimes I lose my train of thought and stuff, and I have to, try to piece it all together in some form of making sense. But that's pretty much my feelings on it. I want to say try harder to impress me or offend me or upset me. Probably with fandoms I know, if you want to issue challenge stories, and that way I think it would have a much better impact on me, and I could give a more interesting evaluation of it. Like, I've seen Star Wars so much, I hate Star Wars. So that really bothered me, because I'm like, why would these characters do that? Who in their right mind would do that? I mean, it even starts out much like this, like having, nothing that alludes to the horror that is to come. And this isn't really the word I want to use, but if you want to upset me or really have a story that tops Star Turds, you're going to have to do better than this. Because I've been around the internet, and a lot of stuff, like I said, I'm kind of a tolerant person, so a lot of stuff does not offend me. Gross shit bothers me, but I will not read a fic that is entirely filled with gross shit. And again, I'm not bothered by non-con. I'm very much bothered by rape being so under, how do I explain this? I'm bothered by, like, it's okay, he really loved me, so it's not really rape because I love him too. No, it is rape, and you should never dumb it down or just wipe it away, because rape is a very serious matter. You don't do that. That's a good way to get me pissed off at your story. And I have gotten pissed off at stories by not bringing any proper conclusion to the fact that this person was raped. It's just, hey, the rapist is dead now, and then you can live happily ever after by going to rehabilitation. And I'm like, no, that's not how that works, especially in a fiction story. But anyway, I can get into that whole rant in another time, probably with another story later. So, this was Sweet Apple Massacre. Yeah, whatever. It's a thing. Don't read it. Don't give it to people to have them read. It's not funny. And I'm not bothered by it. I just wasted like 50 minutes of mine and your time. But thanks for trying. Next time you see me, we'll be reading cupcakes. I'm probably going to take a break and get something to drink and eat, and then I will be right back doing cupcakes. I'm Caleb Cat, and this has been Bad Fanfiction Theater. Thank you for listening.